It's kind of like if it happened 2,000 years ago, it was God. If it happens now, it's demonic. And
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of drilled into a lot of Christians' minds that anything supernatural must be evil.
Welcome back to Brewery Ministries. We're going to jump back into our interview with Evan Reida. He is a hypnotist, and so he has a very interesting perspective on some of the supernatural events in the Bible, the miracles. So, a very interesting conversation. This is part 2 of 3, so if you missed part 1, there's a link in the description where you can watch that. So without any further ado, here is Evan. I was reading the story, and in John chapter 20, Jesus seems to walk through a wall. He goes through a wall or something into a room where the door's locked and appears to the disciples. What do you think happened there? Do you think this is like a quantum physics situation? Is this just passing through the wall like a ghost? I mean, did he hide in the room and then just pop out? I don't know. What do you think? What are your theories?
Well, I've got a lot of theories on that one, actually. Well, I mean, it's very possible he was able to teleport there. You know? I mean, we see them touching him physically. I believe in that story. So somehow he's physically in, is it possible that you could, I guess, to quote some of the other religions, rearrange your vibrations so you can pass through solid object, there's been stories of stuff like that happening. I mean, when you're talking about the Son of God, there's any way he could have done that, But I think it's very possible that he teleported there in some way. He just manifested himself.
I've heard about the vibrations theory from my physics teacher in high school, because he told me it was kind of like math. If you punched a wall, you'd have to do it like 1 trillion times, but that trillionth time, your fist might actually pass through the wall. I'm like, wait, really? So I don't totally understand how it works. I was a little skeptical, but I did think, well, maybe Jesus knows all this stuff. I mean, if he actually made the world, then he probably knows how to manipulate it. So I always wondered, is he just manipulating physics, or can he just, he could probably just do whatever he wants. But yeah. I had teleport on my list. I also had, did he maybe this is what teleportation is, but travel through another dimension to get there? I don't know.
That's an interesting theory. That's one of the theories about Bigfoot, actually.
Is it really?
Yeah, how Bigfoot disappears so easily. But, I mean, when you look at what we know, all matter in the universe is energy vibrating at different frequencies. So if you vibrate at the right frequency, it might be possible to pass through solid objects.
Wow.
But we also have, I think it was Enoch. Enoch just disappears one day. So I have a tendency to link things across the Bible that are similar like that. And it's like, well, if Enoch can disappear, is it possible Jesus can appear somewhere?
Mm-hmm.
As to how that's done, I couldn't tell you, but I mean, we have more than one person also ascending into heaven. So
yeah, you've got Elijah, right?
Yeah. And possibly Moses. There's a real mystery behind what happened to Moses.
Oh, interesting. There is a lost book of the Bible that talks about that, but nobody knows what it says. It's called the Ascension of Moses. Do you know about that?
I haven't heard about that. No.
So in the book of Jude, Jude actually refers to that book. He says something about a debate between Michael the Archangel and Satan over what to do with Moses' body, or who owns it, right? Because Satan wants it, and Michael says, no, this belongs to God or something. So that's like all they know about it. There's a huge write-up on the website Bible Hub about everywhere that it's been quoted, but the original is lost, so we have no idea. But it is really interesting. I read Jude one day last year, and I was like, wait a sec, what is this?
That's
That kind of thing fascinates me.
It could be one of those books that was sort of hidden away by the elites of that religion too. The whole Hebrew religion. Because there are stories that there was knowledge that the priests sort of kept from the general public.
Oh, really?
So it's possible that could have been lost that way, or somebody has a copy hidden away.
Yeah, they're like, this book's too weird. We can't give this to the public.
Yeah, the Vatican has a depository full of what are supposedly lost scriptures. So the ones that they didn't want to put in the Bible are apparently they have copies of. So
like the stuff from the Dead Sea Scrolls, the extra stuff.
More than likely, yeah.
Yeah, I'm very curious about some of that stuff.
Yeah. What's interesting to me is reportedly there were hundreds of scriptures being passed around during the early church. And then we ended up with 66, and there's probably about, I don't know the exact number, but probably about 100 in the Apocrypha by now.
Yeah, I do know they were reading Enoch. They all read that up until close to Augustine's day, and he didn't really like that book, so I guess he grew up in a church that split or something, and part of it was over what to do with the book of Enoch. So Enoch fell out of favor in like the 3rd century, but Jude and Peter were quoting it back when they were writing the New Testament, so I'm particularly interested in that book.
Yeah, I need to get a copy of it and read through it.
Ooh, I have a companion guide.
Yeah.
There's actually a free PDF online you can download of just the book of Enoch.
Interesting.
So we should get it and read it.
Yeah, I'll have to look that up. But
on the subject of Jesus teleporting, in science, I've heard that they've successfully teleported atoms. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. Do you know anything about that?
I haven't.
Because I know we can't teleport like a person, because we're way far away from that. But even if they could teleport an atom, then it shows that's possible. I know they can link two atoms and put one somewhere else. And they were trying to put one in space and do data transfer that way, but I don't think they've ever figured out how to do that. But some of that quantum physics manipulation and stuff like that, it shows you that there's more possible than what we know. And I wonder if Jesus knew all that stuff and we just don't.
Yeah. Well, it makes you wonder a lot about the stories you hear about a lot of those old Buddhist monks that were doing crazy stuff when they were meditating. There was a story I heard about a year ago about this old monk that when he died, he was meditating. He just turned into a light and disappeared.
That's not really that far off from Enoch or Elijah being taken up into heaven in a chariot of fire or something.
Yeah, it made me wonder. I'm like, this sounds really familiar, and I guess it's happened a few times.
Huh.
So it's made me wonder what Christians are missing that's keeping us from seeing this stuff happen. And I think it's really just an overall ignorance of what, I guess, the true nature of God really is.
Well, I believe I've told you before at the brewery group that I read a study on survey of supernatural beliefs, right? And people in the church were the least likely to believe in supernatural events, which I thought was odd. All they had to do was believe in one supernatural event to count. And I thought that was weird because the Old Testament is loaded with supernatural stuff. So is the New Testament. So I thought that was strange. But over the years, I've noticed that we have gravitated away from the more supernatural worldview of the people who are alive during the writing of the Bible and the creation of it. And I've seen a few turning points. One was around the 3rd century with Augustine. There were common supernatural beliefs about Scripture at that time, and he took some more humanistic views, because I think he struggled with the existence of angels and demons and things like that. I think he believed in them, but then when you get into, well, what are they doing all the time? Like, do they have jobs? That stuff he seemed to struggle with and seemed to either downplay it or kind of put it away. Part of it seems to be just because he was reading an English Bible and couldn't read the original language. But yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I can see a point, in the 3rd century and maybe around the 10th century, where we like slowly de-supernaturalized the Bible itself. And now in 2022, it's even harder for us to believe in some of those things.
Yeah. It's kind of like, if it happened 2,000 years ago, it was God. If it happens now, it's demonic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of drilled into a lot of Christians' minds that anything supernatural must be evil. Especially, I grew up around a lot of Southern Baptists, and it was almost as if they were afraid of anything supernatural. And it's like, well, we have a supernatural God. There's got to be two sides to every coin. And we go to church every Sunday and we hear these stories about this kind of stuff that used to happen. Why not now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point, because it's kind of like we were saying earlier. It probably just depends on the source, whether or not it's good or bad, right? Because, if you try to connect with a demon, well, then you might be tapping into an evil source. But if you're trying to do what Peter did, or you're trying to do what Jesus did, even if you're exploring natural processes, if the source is God, then it's probably okay, right? And we're scared of that even. I get it a little bit, because for me, it's not that I think that stuff is evil. I just wouldn't know where to start if I were going to try to do it,
Yeah.
Like, because I've had a couple people in my life who I've met, they've told me that, one time I had a paralyzed vocal cord, and this guy told me that he could heal it, and he tried, and it just didn't work. And another time it was my jaw. I had like a dislocated jaw joint and some issues going on there, and that didn't work for me. So I didn't know what to do with that. But on the other hand, like, this guy came to church who had like a softball-sized tumor, and it just disappeared. It was in his stomach, or maybe it was golf ball-sized, like a golf ball-sized tumor in his stomach, and it just disappeared. Like, the doctors told him, this is bad. You probably don't have long to live. And so he goes back a couple weeks later, and it's gone. It's like, well, what do you do with that? So I've seen a couple situations like that, and then I've seen a couple healings by Christians just not do anything. So I don't really know. I don't know why that didn't work for some, and then these other ones, they had something pretty miraculous happen.
I think the will of God is still going to govern all things. But I think a major problem you run into when you start teaching that kind of stuff is pretty much have the same type of system to use, good or evil, when it comes to if you want to use those kind of practices. Based on what I've learned, it's the same type of thing. You just change what you're working with.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah.
So if one of these people, and there are Christians that are trained in that kind of knowledge, if that became a widespread teaching, you start opening up little classes in schools, everybody has a choice as to whether they're going to use it for good or evil. It's not as clear cut as you've been called by God, so you can only do good with this. I mean, we see in the Old Testament that that's not the case, that prophets do sinful things with the power God gave them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's something that, maybe early Christians, or I guess like you were talking about, like around the 10th century, it started getting buried and becoming legend because the church was afraid what happens if people just know how to do this stuff. Spiritual warfare takes on a whole new meaning at that point.
Oh, yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah.
So you want to go into a third question here that's related?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay. So since you're somebody who has a lot of experience in hypnotism and energy, why do you think there aren't very many supernatural events today? Do you think it is just do you think the training has just been lost, or the art of it, or do you think there are actual less supernatural things going on today? Like God's not doing them as often. He's not doing big miracles like he was in the Old and New Testament.
I think there's kind of a two-part answer. One, I think that has to do with, so in the New Testament, Jesus hands over that job to his disciples. So a lot of times we're praying for God to do this stuff, or Jesus, but we see very clearly in the New Testament him handing the reins over for a lot of things. And he even mentions, you'll do even greater things than what I've done. So I think we as Christians have kind of been like, well, we want to put all the responsibility back on him, but just studying the end, the ascension and everything, it's just essentially what he's saying is now it's your job to do what I was doing. I think in the other part, I think it's happening more often than we realize. I think it's just that what we picture in our minds as being supernatural is not what's really happening.
Ooh, that's good. Say more.
So when I've had odd occurrences happen through when I've used law of attraction for things, I could say, well, logically this sequence of events happened, but how did I get into that sequence of events? I put my mental intention out there, then all of a sudden something happened and I'm in the result I wanted. A person could, you could have a really severe illness, and maybe you don't have a spontaneous healing, but somebody brings you the answer to that illness. So somebody else is the vessel and they bring you a medicine or a treatment plan.
Like a doctor?
Yeah. I've noticed people that are in poverty, they tend to recognize miracles more too. Because I've seen several occasions with people that they're having trouble feeding their family, and out of the blue, the father just gets a huge contract, and he gets by, or somebody shows up and gives them a check, and they'll recognize that as a godsend. I think a lot of us that haven't been desperate enough, we have a higher standard for what supernatural is.
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for watching. We're gonna pause this interview right here. There's gonna be one more episode with Evan that's coming out soon. So hit the subscribe button if you enjoyed this, hit the notification bell, and if you'd like to know more about Brewery Ministries and how we're helping to innovate faith exploration, bringing it into breweries, coffee shops, and online, sign up for the email newsletter at breweryministries.org. We'll see you again for the next episode.